This is probably a little bit outside the holiday spirit, but I've always hated Ohio State. I'm sure people out there that watch Bury Your Bookie, and by the way, welcome back to this first edition of the week, Bury Your Bookie, a very important week as we try to dig our way out of the holiday and all of that fat, all of those carbs that we consumed. I hope you guys had a very happy holiday because it seems like I'm starting on a bitter note here. Always hated Ohio State ever since Woody Hayes punched that kid. Goes way back with me. And I'm sure you have teams that you root for to lose every time that they take the field, coaches that you root against. Everybody has those where every emotional fiber that you can muster up is designed to put some kind of a whammy on a team like Ohio State that ends up losing out. Craig Krenzel. I mean, how on earth? This Terry Porter came across the field there, 2003 Fiesta Bowl, Tostitos Fiesta Bowl. I boycotted Frito Lay for the next 20 years, would not eat a chip after seeing that game stolen. Poor Larry Coker. Larry Coker was the coach of the Hurricanes. He was about to go undefeated and win back-to-back championships, consecutive years, never lose a game. This was a guy that ended up coaching at the University of San Antonio, Texas, and or Texas San Antonio, right? Didn't even know they were a school. I thought it was like an online school. That was his next coaching job after nearly winning back-to-back national championships. Robbed in that 2003 Fiesta Bowl by a very smug, and the Ohio State people. Now, we're here in Miami, so of course we felt that pain. The Ohio State people for years were calling in because there's an influx of people from the Midwest. They kind of tend to gravitate towards the west coast of South Florida, like Naples area, Marco Island. It really is amazing how much money these people in the Midwest have accumulated so they can support and I guess now pay these Ohio State players with name, image, and likeness deals that surpass just about everything until Michigan, of course, came along and now has a quarterback to stick in their face. But I have to say, I delighted in the failure of Ohio State. That was one of my favorite things that happened over the holiday weekend. And for them to lose the game outright, wow. Imagine if you had made that call and said, "Hey, give me Michigan on the money line." That had to be substantial, right? 20 plus, nearly three touchdown underdogs going into the ball game. No shot, no quarterback. Couldn't possibly have been able to hang at the horseshoe, for God's sake, with the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ticketed on a magic carpet ride to a bye in the first round of the college football playoffs, championship in the conference, and possibly winning a national championship for Ryan Day. And instead, flat as a Parisian runway model, man. And they just get mowed down. The other guy I always root against, too, and this was a nice way to sort of, well, we still have a Monday night game to consider here tonight, which we'll get into. A very difficult spot there. Broncos, and they're laying 6 points against the Cleveland Browns, who just fired their coach after one of the most embarrassing moments we've seen in coaching history. Actually, there were quite a few of them over the weekend. We'll get into that, but that goes back to Thanksgiving Day. But I root against Kyle Shanahan also because of the simple fact, well, of course, you had that whole business where they blew the Super Bowl where a guy decides, hey, I'm going to get cute here and start throwing a football. And the Patriots come back from the grave and win the Super Bowl several years back. And then he had this smarmy quote. Some ink-stained wretch is in the front row, probably been covering the 49ers for some, not even like mainstream newspaper, like a weekly thing like the Flyer or whatever. And, outside the Bay Area there. And he asked a question. Jimmy Garoppolo, there was speculation he would be dropped by the 49ers. And a guy raises the question at a press conference, innocuous question, right? He says, hey, can you guarantee that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be on the roster by the end of the week? And Shanahan very smugly addresses the guy, and not even like a Parcells, but sort of with an intellectual snobbery, and says, I can't guarantee that anybody's going to be alive next week, which, all right. It's a little smarmy. Poor schmuck is just trying to get a quote for his newspaper article. And he says, so I can't tell you if Garoppolo is going to be here or not. Ever since that moment, I've rooted for the 49ers to lose every game. So it was just a thing of beauty last night when you saw the conditions. I mean, were you not gagging on the fact that you got sucked in once again to betting the 49ers? And they were only getting 6 points in the fucking snow in Buffalo. And the forecast was not for the snow to start up and start hammering the field like that until maybe they were looking for some light flurries in the second half. But no, this is Buffalo, New York. It snows there from early September all the way through till May. People are still snow tires are a big factor. Guys have chains on their tires on their cars. They can't navigate the roads there. It's impossible. But if you do live in that area and you are a Buffalo Bill player, you are accustomed to this shit where the 49ers have no idea, right? They're smoking weed up there amongst the redwood trees in the Santa Clara, and they've never seen anything like this. So they had no chance in this ball game last night, and I took particular delight in backing heavily the Buffalo Bills because I root against Shanahan in every game. Now, hopefully you made a haul over the Thanksgiving weekend. We had a pretty good week. We'll get into that. The holiday season is upon us, though, and I would recommend this also. If you're going to make resolutions for New Year's, and 2025 is going to be your year in the whole thing, and I say this every year myself, start now. Why not start now? If it's gambling, though, you can wait on that because now's the time, the holiday season, to just send it in. Your number one source and number one betting platform, of course, is Bet Online. They are the world's greatest. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with constant real-time odds in action, ability to watch the games and bet on them as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA and college basketball, NHL, UFC, big boxing matches coming up, head to the website today to see why BetOnline is America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, we often talk about this on the show, and it kills you if you're a bettor. It really does, where a coach decides to get cute. Now, you can factor this in. We've mentioned this a few times with the University of Miami football team, which lost its chance to go to the ACC title game in what figured to be not necessarily a cakewalk, but certainly as double-digit favorites, the general public was thinking that the Miami Hurricanes were going to beat the Syracuse Orange, who were having a decent season. They got this Kyle McCord kid from Ohio State. You think Ryan Day is regretting letting that guy go? He lit it up this year. Syracuse, no longer any consistent power. I mean, they've had a handful of good seasons here and there, but it's not like the days when they had Ernie Davis and Jim Brown and Jim Nance, Larry Zonka, Floyd Little. Went a little out of chronology there, but I was trying to recall all the names. Those days are gone, long gone, man. Ben Schwartzwalder, he's been dead for a long time. He didn't realize that the forward pass was legal. And since then, they've had a couple of periods where they were okay. Paul Free Pasqualoni did all right. McPherson had a couple of good years. But in general, nothing special. So if you were a University of Miami backer where you're willing to lay 11 points on the road against a Syracuse team that could fire the rock, and one thing that Miami hadn't shown this year is the ability to defend virtually anybody. They have been pulling off a series of miracles. They finally were exposed in that Georgia Tech game. Georgia Tech later on gave a good account of itself. And, whoa, you talk about a heartbreaking loss over the weekend. I mean, losing to Georgia in the fashion that they did, my God. If you had Georgia Tech on the money line, you had every reason to just go out to the longest pier. If you're here, especially if you're living in Florida, very appropriate. At least the water's warm as you go down. So you'd want to be buried right there with the treasure from the Etosha. After losing a fortune that could have come your way, having Georgia Tech on the money line over Georgia. But, if you looked at what happened with the Hurricanes during the course of the season, really didn't match up against anybody. Louisville came on later in the year and closed well, but at that point where the Hurricanes played them in a shootout, which they narrowly escaped, Louisville was perceived to be in a serious decline. So an unchallenged schedule, and yet they came into the game with a loss, and all they needed to do was win this ball game. They're in the ACC championship game, and you're thinking, what could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? And that's where we get into, you need a sound effect there, and that old soap opera thing. Here it comes. The Cristobal factor. Mario Cristobal, we've been talking about that all year long. It's got to be a 7-point part of your equation if you're trying to figure out what to do with the Miami Hurricanes, which they would probably come under little consideration now since they're not going to play in the ACC title game. So what does this fool do? And this is the same guy that didn't take a knee a year ago against Georgia Tech. That would be Your one job as a coach would be to be good at game management and situational decision making. You have to understand strategies, and you also have to have a little bit of gut instinct. Remember how pissed off Aaron Rodgers was at Matt LaFleur when in a playoff game, a chance to go to the Super Bowl, instead of just going ahead and giving Aaron Rodgers one shot from the inside the 10-yard line to try and win the ball game. Matt LaFleur kicks a field goal, which still leaves them trailing, and then tries to get an onside kick. Go fuck yourself, Matt. That's what Aaron Rodgers said. That was, in essence, when he checked out on the Green Bay Packers, which, they got the last laugh, did they not, with the accumulation of talent that they received from the New York Jets in terms of draft picks and players for a shot fighter in Aaron Rodgers, who has the Jets staggering around at 3-9. But we'll get to that because they're firing everybody. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in the Jets' offices today after the heads were rolling down the hallway there. It looked like you were at the Century Lanes. Here's Don Carter. I'll go cross lane for the 10 pin. But yeah, I mean, if you were looking at this ball game, the guy kicks a field goal with 4 minutes to go. Mario Cristobal kicks a field goal, opts for a field goal with 4 minutes to go, trailing by 7 points. Now you're at the 10-yard line. You've got Cam Ward. You're paying this guy millions of dollars in name, image, and likeness money. He has pulled any number of games. The one salvation that you've had all year long, Mario, is you had Cam Ward, and the guy was pulling off miracles. Not every time, but close enough. Comes back, rallies against a California team with the help of some very shoddy officiating, and but rallies the team from the grave. And they end up coming back from over 20 points down in that ball game in the second half. Did it any number of times. So what would you rather do? Give Aaron Rodgers a shot from the 10-yard line, or take a chance that you can recover an onside kick and then win the game because you kicked a field goal that put you in a position where you were still trailing? And same thing here. You kick a field goal, you're still down 4. You have to make a stop. If you didn't give Cam Ward, if you gave him a shot and he failed, which entirely possible. I mean, I don't know that it's a high percentage. Let's say that works 33% of the time. You had a lot better chance of completing that and putting yourself in a tie in that ball game at that point. And if you failed, you're leaving Syracuse at the 10-yard line, a very compromising position. If you can get that defensive stop, now you're going to have good field position, and the touchdown that would have won the ball game for you only ties it for you. But even then, if you really had balls, maybe you go for 2 in that spot and you don't take the game into overtime. But that's not Mario Cristobal, and that kind of coaching, you just wonder how on earth somebody could get to the point of being a highly paid head coach and not understand the simplest of strategies. And then after the game, you're alibiing it away. And this happened with Eberflus too, talking about, the analytics said we had 4 minutes left. Yeah, but you can't fucking stop a nosebleed. How the hell are you going to stop Syracuse? They run the ball 6 times, get a couple of first downs, and you never get the ball back. Schmuck. Eberflus, that was another thing, and we didn't get a chance to be with you to talk about those Thanksgiving Day games, and they were beauties, huh? You're looking at the first game on the slate. The Lions are just annihilating the Chicago Bears. The Bears look like shit. The Lions are looking great. Lions, in many people's opinion, right now, I guess the debate would be who's better, the Lions or the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Eagles, of course, distinguished themselves again yesterday with a big win over the Baltimore Ravens. Vic Fangio, who ran from South Florida after seeing what everybody is now calling a very soft Miami Dolphins defensive unit, without a lot of changes. I mean, there were some personnel changes. They lost a couple of really good guys. Van Ginkel and Wilkins were 2 stellar players for the Miami Dolphins defense the year before this, but they lose those guys to free agency because they're paying other guys big money and couldn't afford everybody. And but they lost Fangio, who somehow is gone, and his defense statistically wasn't terrible last year, where now it ranks as a veritable sieve. More holes in that defense than an O.J. Simpson alibi. And Fangio, all of a sudden, is lighting it up. Number 1 in just about every defensive statistical category with the Philadelphia Eagles, who you could easily debate are the best team in the NFL right now. I believe they won 8 in a row after beating the Ravens yesterday, and they did it in a convincing enough fashion to make you think that Fangio indeed was a difference maker. He was supposed to be the year before when people were actually saying that, wow, I mean, this was the best acquisition that Miami had in its offseason. And he was at odds with Mike McDaniel in terms of method and approach and the attitude of the players and the way that they were taking to his drill sergeant like no nonsense approach to defense. And it was old school versus new school. And the old school decided to fly the coop and now has manifested itself very well and distinguished itself with the Philadelphia Eagles. But that being said, I mean, you're watching the Lions on Thanksgiving Day. They are just crushing the Bears like a grape. And the Bears appear to be out of it. Now, you're getting, what, I think it was 6 points with the Bears, which didn't seem like enough, did it? And that's going to, with the Bears, you're getting 6 points. Something in that neighborhood. And you're just hoping, if you were a Bears backer, that somehow, oh, no, they were getting 9.5. That was a 9.5 point spread. Line kept going down, and so it fell into the category of double digits. I know we were debating this before and trying to figure out how we could hit a Turkey Day parlay and hit all 3 games. I don't know if you guys had any luck doing that, but it wasn't easy because with the Lions breezing, you would have been more tempted to go ahead and press your bet on the Detroit Lions than to think that somehow miraculously Chicago is going to stage a late comeback, with Caleb Williams looking very inept and ineffective in the first half, and the Bears literally looking like garbage. So they come roaring all the way back, and they're in a position to go ahead and actually win the game and or send it into OT with 32 seconds to go. Now, what's the one thing announcers are always screaming in that position where you're limited? They had one timeout left, and you didn't want to use it unless you were going to be setting up for what would have been, a game-tying field goal in that spot. So what happens? Matt Eberflus, who was already under fire, I mean, they've lost games in some really fugazi fashion so far this year, the Chicago Bears. They had a blocked field goal against the Kansas City Chiefs go against them with this guy Santos. And they lost to the Commanders on a Hail Mary where one of their guys was talking to the people in the stands there saying, hey, I'm revving up my Bears allies that came to the game here. And in the meantime, the ball's in the fucking air. And he ends up tipping it to a Commanders receiver and a Bears tagged with another loss. So there's 2, I mean, just distinctly ugly losses that Eberflus has suffered. But this one was all on him because everybody's screaming. In fact, I think the television, whoever was broadcasting that game, the first game on Thanksgiving, did they not just cut to a commercial when you saw Williams get sacked? Thinking, of course, he's going to call the timeout. There's 32 seconds left. And announcers, as I said, were always screaming, well, the one thing he can't afford to do here is get sacked because that's going to make them burn their last timeout. But even if it does force you into something that you don't want to do, you have to do it. So the fact, and Eberflus after the game said, well, you know what? They kind of played out the way we wanted it to. You fucking asshole. Imagine you got the Bears on the money line in this thing, and you're about to get off to a great start. You're going to say, hey, you know what? Turn off the oven. We're all going out to dinner to the most expensive restaurant that we can find. It's open here because I just made a giant score with the Bears on the money line. But this guy doesn't call a timeout, and you have to give the Bears. They've never done this in like the 300-year history of the Chicago Bears, going all the way back, to the Papa Bear himself. And they've never fired a coach during the course of the season. So they just finally had enough. And with Eberflus, who has a horrible statistic working against him, I believe it was 5-19. It was either 5-14 or 5-19 in one-score games. So not exactly stellar in terms of strategist. And this was just bozoic at best. And that's the way we started it off on Thanksgiving Day. Kind of a rough way to go, like I said, if you had the Chicago Bears. The other game, too, I mean, sometimes you just have to believe in trends. I'm not a trend guy. Said it many, many times here on the program. Where, you're looking at something, and the last time the two clubs met was 2012, and yet you're citing a statistic. Well, you know what? When the temperature's under 28 degrees, this team is 3-15 against the spread, and they haven't won. You're thinking, okay, there has to be a time where that's not applicable. And you would have thought maybe that was the case. I convinced myself, and I'm sorry, people, that we buried you with the idea that the Miami Dolphins were worth taking with 3.5 points against the Green Bay Packers. What could possibly go wrong? Well, first of all, It was cold outside. It's always going to be fucking cold in December in Green Bay. This wasn't as atrocious in terms of conditions as you saw with the Buffalo Bills, but not favorable if you're accustomed to the weather in South Florida, which today people are out there, they're killing live animals and wrapping them around their neck because it's like 65 degrees. It thins your blood out over time, no matter what you're used to or where you came from. You could be from Bismarck, North Dakota, which was -6 on the temperature chart. Called a spot in the country yesterday. And still, if you spend like 3 weeks in Florida, and especially if you're here training year round on the athletic fields of the Miami Dolphins practice facilities, you're not going to be too accustomed to the cold. That being said, these guys have played in cold weather before, so I'm trying to overlook this and think what could go wrong with this Miami Dolphin team. They seem to finally find a rhythm. Tua Tagovailoa came back. He's completing passes at a ridiculous clip, and he actually, after a slow start in the first half where the Dolphins did nothing, his completion percentage was deceptive there because he ended up like 36 out of 44 or something like that. So completing about 70% of his passes still, and yet it wasn't nearly enough. They got creamed in that ball game. So that was the one that was a little bit suspect. You now have the Green Bay Packers. What are they hosting Philadelphia this week? I believe so, and that could be a real test as the Philadelphia Eagles playing great football. No, the Eagles are playing the Panthers, so they have a soft spot this week. Packers are in tough though, as I recall. As I'm trying to find a game here, the Green Bay Packers. Where the hell are we? Packers. Nowhere to be seen on this particular chart. All right, we'll get that information. Probably on a bye week, right? I'm trying to find them desperately. Anyway, playing good football. You can take nothing away from them. Sorry for the lapse there. That was like a senior moment for a second here. I'm looking at the odds for this week's games, and I don't see any Green Bay Packers in there. But playing well enough to make you think that they are legitimate contenders. A lot of people like Jordan Love. Acquitted himself very well in that Thanksgiving Day game. Seemed like a really cool cat. Team looked like it was rallying around him. You didn't have that bitterness and that disenchantment and disconnection that you had towards the end of the Aaron Rodgers era with the Green Bay Packers, where everybody was walking on eggshells all the time because they didn't want to set Aaron off, have him go into some dark space and just retreat and be unreachable by anybody from a mental standpoint. And yet he's still calling signals there. And how did that work out for the New York Jets? Not very well. A lot of people have already lost their jobs as a result of that particular move. But Packers distinguished himself in that ball game. Yeah, that being said, never again. I mean, the trend is there. I think it's definitive. I think it's more than decisive that if you see the Miami Dolphins in cold weather, whatever amount of points you're getting, it's not enough. You're going to get frostbite trying to wait for them to finally win a ball game under those circumstances, and they did it again. Now, still speculation that it's weird that you have a team that's 5-7, doesn't beat anybody that has a winning record, and when they get into a spot where you're thinking they're finally on a little bit of a run, and they might be able to turn things around, then they always fall short. And time after time, it's the old Cyndi Lauper thing. Time after time. I keep trying to believe that that is a trend that doesn't hold up, and smacked in the face like it was a right hand from Jake Paul, right in the face there, as Mike Tyson said, "Hey, you weren't supposed to hit me." Crazy, crazy stuff. I supposedly too, Jake Paul. Is this true that he's gonna find Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. And remove him from some crack house, and they're going to stage another one of these farcical bouts? Will the public be duped again? I'm going to say yes to that. We're a pretty gullible group as a public. All right, interesting day around the National Football League yesterday. The other college football stuff that was happening in Texas gets into the championship game. First year in the SEC, going to face Georgia. That was a wild one that we mentioned. Georgia and Georgia Tech. Wow, tough beat if you had Georgia Tech, because it looked like they were in the driver's seat till very late in the game. I don't know what exactly to make of Georgia, except it's hard to rule them out, because every time you're convinced that it's okay to write them off, They find a way to do something miraculous, and that's what they did. Texas against Texas A&M. A lot of people were willing to lay the points with Texas in that ball game. They did prevail and cover the point spread, but it was not overwhelmingly impressive to the point where you thought, well, these guys can't be beaten. So we'll see. That'll be an interesting matchup for the SEC championship. Georgia and Texas coming up, and we'll get some analysis, no doubt, on that ball game. A lot of close calls yesterday. Games that could have gone either way. If you had Kirk Cousins, are you thinking about a cyanide tap today? My God, well, what could go wrong in that ballgame? The Falcons were knocking on the door. I ended up with the Falcons, and I think it was getting 1 point in their ballgame yesterday. They were playing the Chargers, who have been very, very representative this year, with Jim Harbaugh at the helm. And the Falcons, it seemed like they had half a dozen opportunities to win this game, and Kirk Cousins kept throwing picks, one after another, four in their ball game. So that was a real tough beat. A couple of money line deciders in games that figured to be close. Colts and the Patriots. That came down to the wire, a 1 point differential there. Texans and the Jags. Jags were getting blown out. Texans come back, and they end up prevailing 23-20, failing to cover the point spread. Our man, the football guy, loved the Arizona Cardinals. They loomed to be in a position to win that game all the way throughout. It seemed like they were in command. End up losing it at the end there as Sam Darnold sort of continued somewhat of a Cinderella run here, where Minnesota's not playing great, but they're winning ball games, and they prevail there 23-22. But the football guy, who went into the week 18-4, and we're starting to follow his picks and relay them out of obligation to you guys out here on Bury Your Bookie, he was all over the Cardinals there, getting 4 points in that game, and also had to play against the G-Men, who were big-time losers to the Dallas Cowboys. That was one that what we were convinced on Thanksgiving Day was going to end up helping us digest our turkey in a whole lot better fashion. All right, quickly here, the Monday night game. And I don't know that I have a strong opinion on this one. In my personal bookmaking venture with a friend of mine who all of a sudden is on a little bit of a hot streak that I need to see derailed quickly, or it's going to become very costly for a rare time here. As I've mentioned a couple of times, 15 years I've been booking this guy's bets, and I believe he's had to pay me 14 of the 15. And that was a minor exchange of funds that went his way the 1 year that he won. But Broncos now laying 6 against the Browns. The Browns with Jameis Winston. What a wild card that is to try to handicap. You were probably safer banking on Jameis Winston not having a great ball game and making some kind of horrendous game-changing mistake, especially against a Broncos team that's been way better than anybody could have anticipated. There wasn't much hope being held out for the Denver Broncos. And remember in the preseason, all of these pundits were talking about, well, Bo Nix, he really doesn't look ready for the pros. And the guy has acquitted himself extremely well. So the Broncos deserve to be favored in this game. They are at home in the Mile High City, and I would imagine the weather conditions there are not going to be overwhelmingly favorable. The Cleveland Browns are certainly used to this, as we saw a couple of weeks ago with that horrendous condition game that the Browns were hosting a couple of weeks ago on, what was that? Was that a Monday Night Football game? It was one of the nighttime affairs. And it looked awful. So they're not going to necessarily be blown away by adverse conditions, although the Mile High City definitely is worth a couple of points there because you're just absolutely wheezing. My inclination would be to go ahead and lay the 6 points with the Broncos in this game. I just don't trust the Browns, but and it doesn't seem like a lot of points. Doesn't it seem like you should be getting more? Let's get greedy here. I mean, maybe your bookie will be in the holiday spirit and just give you a couple of extra points here. Say, hey, listen, DeForrest, you deserve a break. But that's it. Slight lean towards the Broncos laying the points against the Browns team that it's too hit or miss. If Jameis Winston somehow miraculously plays a clean ball game, are they in there with a shot? Certainly to cover the spread, yes. But what could go wrong? And that would be, as we saw yesterday with various quarterbacks around the league, a series of horrendous pick sixes. Aaron Rodgers, that just end up doing you in. All right, a lot of fun being with you. We'll have our handicappers all throughout the week. They did a good job this week. Ended up cumulative 7-4. We didn't get Troy West into the program last week, but we did have 3 others weigh in. And Scotty M. It was on fire this past week. So he might be one to follow as he was really, really very strong at 3-1 for the week with his selections. So we'll see if we can continue that trend. Yeah, Scotty M.O. And we had unison, three guys all picking South Carolina, which they did prevail by the dreaded dagger there. They won by 3, laying, or no, they were getting 2.5. So it was, what am I talking about? It was a win and an easy cover for the people on Bury Your Bookie. All right, a lot of fun being with you on this Monday. Hope everybody had a great holiday, plenty to eat there and plenty to celebrate. We're in the holiday mode here, but a lot to grind out with basketball and college hoops going on, all the different things that are happening. A disgrace to what went on after the Ohio State-Michigan game. I sound like Larry Merchant when I say this, but he used to begin everything when he was ringside there, and he looked like a brain-dead zombie, and he would say, 2 fighters on a crossroads. But 2 fighters can trash talk their way for 3 months building up to a fight. It's one where they genuinely are going ahead and making you think that there's a real animosity, real hatred going on between the 2 guys. They beat the shit out of each other for 12 rounds, and then what do? They hug each other after the thing is over. It's a game. It's a sport. And this business that's going on, I mean, it happened on 3 different campuses. And it was a disgrace. I mean, please, enough already. You don't have to run out there and stick a flag in the ground after a ball game like that and incite some kind of riot where players are getting pepper sprayed. What happened to sportsmanship? What am I talking about here? I sound like some old guy like Frank DeForrest writing for Sports Illustrated. All right, a lot of fun being with you. We'll see you next time. I'm Jeff DeForrest for Greenlight Ventures, people at nofilter.net, and people at Bet Online. Good luck, everybody. Going to lay to 6 with the Broncos tonight. Very, very tepid wager. That's going to be a small one. Just to have some rooting interest in the game. And hopefully we'll catch you with a winning ticket right here on Bury Your Bookie tomorrow.